Hello, good morning everyone. So for today's video, we're going to have a discussion all about on the course Advanced Principle of Economics, particularly the title Market at Work, which focuses on the concept of supply and demand, or in other terms, the market forces for supply and demand. But before we dig deeper to our discussion, we will have a description of market. So what is market? The term supply and demand refers to the behavior of people as they interact with one another in markets. A market is a group of buyers and sellers of a particular goods and services. So the word buyers determine the concept of demand, while sellers determine the concept of supply. So some markets are formally organized with a building, such as the stock market and the commodities market. Most markets are not formally organized, but they exist because buyers and sellers know them. People knew where to go and buy cars and a bread and any other necessities they wanted in life. And that is what we call markets. A competitive market. So what is a competitive market? It is a market which have many buyers and sellers. It is not controlled by any one person, in which a narrow range of prices are established that buyers and sellers act upon. The number of buyers and sellers are an important part of the definition of the word competition. The second element is that a buyer and a seller cannot influence price based on actions alone. With these two characteristics exist, the market is called competitive or a competitive market. So let's go on to the concept of demand. So we begin our analysis of demand by examining the behavior of buyers in the market for goods and services. Quantity demanded refers to the amount of goods that the buyer are willing and able to purchase. Quantity demanded will vary the price of the good in question. The demand schedule refers to the table that shows the relationship between the good of the price and the quantity demanded. And the demand curve refers to the downward sloping line relating to the price of the quantity demanded. And lastly, the market demand, which refers to the totality or the sum of the individual demands. So let me give you an example of a demand schedule. On the right side, you see there are two columns, which in the first column is the price of the lattice, and the second column is the quantity of lattice demanded. Let us have a sums demand schedule. So demand schedule, it shows the relationship between the price of the good and the quantity demanded. So you cannot make a demand curve without having first the demand schedule. So next, in this example, on my right side, you see there a sums demand schedule and sums demand curve. So on doing the demand curve, you need to base on your demand schedule. So market demand versus individual demand. Suppose that Sam and Dean are the only two buyers in the market for lattice, and the QD stands for the quantity demanded. So to get the QD or the quantity demanded, you need to easily add on that two buyers in the market for lattice, the Sam's and Dean's quantity demanded, to have your final quantity demanded for market. And after doing that, you need to have a market demand schedule and a market demand curve. So based on the two output of Sam's and Dean, you need to have a market demand schedule. And after doing that, you need to have the market demand curve. So on the right side, you can see the demand schedule the market demand schedule. And on the left side, you can see also the market demand curve. And it is seen and observed that it is aligned to each other. And we can say that if the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases. And if the quantity demanded increases, the price also decreases. Demand curve shifters. So the factor is the number of buyers, which categorized into increasing number of buyers and decreasing number of buyers. So in the increasing number of buyers, it increases the quantity demanded at each price, and it shifts the D curve to the right. And for the decreasing number of buyers, first, it decreases the quantity demanded at each price, and second, it shifts the curve to the left. So the demand curve shifters. It's suppose the number of buyers increases, then at each price, quantity demanded will increase into 3%. So law of demand. The law of demand states that there is an inverse relationship between price and the quantity demanded. So as shown as in the graph, the price of ice cream cone and the quantity of ice cream cone, it is seen that there is an inverse relationship between the price and the quantity demand. As the price increases, the quantity of the ice cream cones decreases. And as the quantity of ice cream cones decreases, the price of ice cream cone increases. So there is really an inverse relationship. So change in quantity demanded versus change in demand. The distinction between change in demand and change in quantity demanded is vital to understand the analysis of demand. First, change in quantity demanded have two factors. First, movement along the demand curve happen. Second, is caused by a change in the price of the product. Second, change in demand have two factors also. First, a shift in the demand curve either to the left or to the right happen. And second, it is caused by a change in a determinant other than the price, like just for example, income, taste, or expectation from buyers, etc. So here is the summary between the change in quantity demanded versus the change in demand. In the first column, the variable that affect quantity demanded are the price, the income, price of related goods, tastes, expectations, and number of buyers. And in the second column, a change in demand or a change in this variable represents a movement along the demand curve when its price changes, shifts the demand curve in income, shifts the demand curve when they relate to prices of goods, shifts the demand curve when it relates to tastes, and shift on demand curve when also to expectations, and lastly to the number of buyers, also shift the demand curve. And now let's go on to the second main concept of this report, the concept of supply. Goods and services are supplied to the market by producers who are also sellers. Supply looks at the behavior of the producers. Quantity supplied refers to the amount of a good and services that sellers are willing and able to sell. So what are the determinants of the quantity supplied? First, we have market price of the good or services. Second, also we have input prices. Third, technology. Fourth, expectation about the future level of prices. And lastly, the number of producers of the good and services. So what is law of supply? It states that there is a direct or positive relationship between price and the quantity supplied. At higher prices there will be a higher quantities of the good or services supplied. So the supply schedule is refers to the table that shows the relationship between the price of the good and the quantity supplied. And the supply curve refers to the upward sloping line relating to price of the quantity supplied. Market supply curve. It refers to the totality of the supply curves of the individual producers. So what is law of supply? So it states that there is a positive relationship between price and the quantity of a good supplied. So what it means? This means that supply curves typically have a positive slope, as seen as the graph here. We can conclude that as the price of soybeans per bushel increases, the supply of 1,000 of bushel of soybeans produced per year increases. So there is a direct or positive relationship between price and supply in this law of supply. So let me give you an example of supply schedule. On the right side, composed of two tables, it represents the supply schedule. And so what is supply schedule? It refers to the relationship between the price of a good and quantity supplied. And let's have an example of a Starbucks supply of lattice as a supply schedule. And after doing this supply schedule, we need to have a supply curve. So what is supply curve? It is a graph illustrating how much of a product a firm will supply at different prices. Here, an example of a supply curve. So on the right side, you can see the supply schedule, and in your left side is the supply curve. And it is seen and observed that it is really aligned on the supply schedule. Market supply versus individual supply. So market supply refers to the totality of supplies of all the sellers of a good and services. So market supply curve happen to the totality of the individual supply curves horizontally. So to find the totality of the quantity supplied at any price, we need to add the individual quantities. For example, suppose Starbucks and Peet's are the only two sellers in this market. So QS stands for quantity supplied. So we need to add easily the two sellers in this market, the Starbucks and Peet's, to have our market quantity supplied. So just as easy as that. So after that, you need to have the market schedule. On the left side is the market demand, market supply curve, and on the right side is the market supply schedule, and which is seen and observed aligned to the market supply schedule. So supply curve shifters. It shows how the price affects the quantity supplied, other things being equal. So other things are non-price determinants of supply. Changes in them shift the S curve. So here is an example. Suppose the price of the nut falls. At each price, the quantity of lattice supplied will increase. So summary, variables that influence seller. The first column we have the variable, and the second column a change in this variable. So first in variable we have the price of the good itself. Second, the input prices. Third, the technology, fourth, expectation, and lastly, the number of sellers. And the second column, first we have represents a movement along the supply curve when it changes into price. And second, shift the supply curve when it changes to input prices. Shift the supply curve when it changes into technology. And fourth, shift the supply curve when it relates to expectation. And lastly, shift the supply curve when it affects the number of sellers. So that ends my report. Once again, good morning and keep safe. Lastly, let me present also my references in my assigned topic. Thank you.